The title I held was former assistant editor of the QCT. I think that in some respects juggled between that and being the editor in different times, as we all do sometimes in life. I would say I didn't attain it in title, but I think that I worked it. So title, I don't know. I think it's hard to say. Even at a community newspaper, titles are something you put in the masthead, but there's so much more that happens within the context of it's like a mom and pop shop and that kind of newspaper. So title, well, I began delivering the newspaper, actually. That was my beginning. My entrance was I met a friend who was working. I was working in tourism in Old Quebec, sort of a summer job while going to university. And a friend of mine, one of my colleagues, said, opened her trunk one day and said, look, I work with this English language newspaper, the community newspaper, which I'd never heard of, and said, would you like to help me? I have to deliver these once a week all around town to B&Bs and organizations, and go out to the airport, and I need some help. So, would you like to help? And I said, sure, why not? So we both got the same day off, the weekday off, Thursdays, and off we went. And the first time I walked into the office in the basement of Karen and Francois's home, I just got a flash. It was a really neat feeling, and I thought, wow, it must be really neat to work here. And we came up from the office, and I said, yeah. I shared my comment with my friend, and she said they're looking for a reporter. And I said, oh yeah. And then she said, do you have any experience? And I said, yeah, but it's not teaching. I just finished my teaching degree, and it's not teaching. She goes, yeah, but you have experience. You should apply. And I'm, yeah, but it's not teaching. So I don't know how I thought about it and applied. So my first job with the paper was actually as a delivery person, which was dream number one that I never thought I would be able to achieve in my life. It was one of the dreams, when you're when you're young and you check off the dreams that you want to become a teacher and you want to do all sorts of things. I had thought that being a newspaper delivery person would be a really neat challenge, and so that was the first dream that the Chronicle, I was able to kind of tick off my list with the paper.
And so then you were hired as a reporter when you initially applied?
I applied, and that's it. And I applied and was interviewed actually at the Global Studio on a weekend, which was across from my apartment. So it was quite interesting, the the dynamics, and absolutely. And I think that was also another dream, was to become a reporter. I had experience, and I had put that out into the universe, as they say, many years previously, and never thought that it would become a reality at all. Pretty close to 10 years, just under 10 years, and I came back and freelanced a little bit in the very early stages, and then I moved on to do some freelance work in writing and translating and different things. So I don't think I had a chance to be a cub reporter. I would say that I jumped right in, and that was it. It was, here's the job. I got to learn a little bit of PageMaker, so I got to learn a little bit of the building of the newspaper. I borrowed Francois's camera. We had a dark room at that point in the basement, so I got a lesson and got to borrow his fancy camera, which just really made me nervous. So later, when I had my own little camera, it was a lot easier. And there was no time to be a cub reporter, I guess, in that sense. I had Karen as a really great mentor, and Francois as he was still taking photos, and there was Mike Rashitnik, but there was no other reporter on staff, actually.
Okay.
So when I was hired full-time, I was actually the first in a number of years Before that, there were a lot of people who freelanced, who added columns to the paper. Peter Black from CBC, and a number of people who worked in journalism, some of them in television as well, some of the reporters in television who honed their writing skills and sent in columns on a very regular basis. So my job in the beginning was really the community news. So I would cover the school board. I covered the Central Quebec School Board for almost a decade. Went to their meetings once a month, went to the schools, covered community events, and built my network, sort of finding out, meeting a lot of people from the community, and relying on some really great folks in the community to help me understand the healthcare system. The Jeffrey Hale had almost closed, and then when I got on the paper, there were other issues with an eventual sort of merge with St. Bridget's Home. All of that was in the works, so there was a lot of things that were being looked at. The community institutions. There was a change actually that same year to linguistic school boards. So when I began covering the school boards, it was the first year. So a lot of the commissioners were new. They had merged 5 or 6 at least school boards previously, so you had Catholic and Protestant schools all together, linked through the language, and so watching all of that grow, and these folks learn to work together as one unit was just amazing. So, Cub, I don't know, maybe. Karen helped a lot. She edited my texts. In those days, they came back in by fax, so at least I couldn't see the red. It was just lines and scribbles, but I would sort of stand by the fax machine and pull it all out and go back to to my side of the room and work on it. But she always had broad shoulders and said, do your best, and pointed me in the direction of some great people to. As I said, like Richard Walling, to really learn about the healthcare system. And he's a former editor of the newspaper as well. So it was really neat to sort of, to learn from him what it had been like and get some insight into before I joined the paper. Assistant editor, basically one day, goodness, it wasn't super long into things. It was production day one day, and of course we always sent all of the pages to Karen to review the whole paper before we sent it to the printer. And even, in fact, earlier than that, often she would help spell check or do headlines and things like that. She's very, very good at all of that. So it was excellent to be able to have a team that included her, even if she wasn't always in the office. She was always available and was very, very much part of the process. And one day she said, check out the masthead. You'll notice something. And that's it. That's how she bumped me up. So and I think that Matthew had got bumped up to operations manager around the same time. Right? So Matthew Anderson and I were hired within about 2 weeks of each other, and it was sort of the beginning of a new team. I think, basically, a new chapter. I think I would say with the paper. This, as I said, there hadn't been a full-time reporter at the paper for a number of years. It was the first one that Karen had sort of reached a stage where she said, okay, she was full-time at Global, and she said, okay, now I'm gonna invest in this. And basically, it was a little bit tough to wrangle the whole thing. And so we needed the advent of computers and more technology was kind of hopping into things and using PageMaker. And then when I came, though, we were still using the Waxer. We were still doing paste up, so which I was familiar with. And then we eventually moved into printing out pages out of the printer layout. But we still did the paste up for a while, and then we transitioned. So Matthew was part of that new technology aspect, someone who could help us wrangle all of that stuff full time, building ads in-house and all of that stuff. I think one of the important things is that in having a person at the paper full-time in the office to receive then a lot of faxes, a lot of invitations by mail, trying to sort all that out, being a face at the paper at events. So also being that I think ambassador is there, but it's not really ambassador. It isn't. It is. We're always ambassadors, but you're full-time on news, so you're always living in a community, and you're always trying to have a critical eye, understand what it is that's developing, really understand the history, understand the connections. I always laughed, and especially in Quebec, it's not like, say, Nova Scotia, where I'm from, where you would know somebody's married to somebody else because they take their name. Here they don't. And so I always think that that's terrific. Part of what I love about Quebec, but it did become something interesting, an interesting challenge in my job, because I didn't know the community family tree. I didn't understand who was connected to whom. And so that took a while to kind of figure out the network, and not only the network of who was in place now, at VAC and all sorts of different organizations, but understanding who had been in place, and so then what their perspectives were and what their points of view were, because when you're writing news, you need to talk to a lot of people. You have to understand the story from different perspectives. But you really, most importantly, have to understand, as the journalist putting it together, you have to understand what that perspective of that person is. So you have to understand where they've been or what motivates them in order to best interpret their story. And so that was a big element. I think that was a real game changer. When I was at the paper, when we had a full-time reporter at the paper, we were able to keep that continuity. We were able to understand that. And one of Karen's big rules was you don't have to be there to cover it, which of course makes sense. I couldn't be everywhere. We couldn't be everywhere. And so in fact, there were a lot of people who were community reporters in that sense. They didn't have that byline necessarily. They had their byline, but who would send us a story, send us pictures, or I would call them beforehand or afterwards, knowing they were going, and then we would make sure that we covered the event. So it was really a community sense of coverage in terms of covering the event, because I couldn't be anywhere. Also, it allowed. I think it allowed readers and subscribers access to the paper in a different way, because as a member of the community and somebody who lived there and attended events, when something went down in the paper that they liked or they didn't like, I knew I would hear about it within a day or two, max. And if I peeved somebody off, I would see them, and most of the time it would be very obvious. But that was part of my job too, was to facilitate that, to give them the space to answer, and to encourage them to write a letter, give us a call. We had a policy, I don't know if it's still the same, but we never responded to letters. In very, very, very rare cases did we ever respond to letters. And Karen's theory on that was really good. It was because it's too easy for the paper to have the last word. We always have the last word. And so when a reader had an opinion, we wanted them to know that they could, within reason. We would, if we had to edit, we would, and there were a few letters that we didn't publish, but by and large, we would cut them off after a couple of weeks of same topic if things had already been said. But by and large, people understood that they would have their say. And so we encouraged that and we respected that. And were they always right? No. Were they always, did they always have all of the facts around it? No. And so sometimes that's tough, but you learn to grow a bit of a thicker skin, which is something that I did at the newspaper, and it was healthy to be able to grow that skin a little bit. The first few times were a bit traumatic when you put something out and somebody would kind of nitpick it and say that wasn't quite it, and then they would send a letter to clarify. And sometimes you understood that the clarification was also because it was something that had to be said in a certain way for a government reason, or so then you started to understand that there were people behind this, but that some things had to, they went down like this, and it was important to understand the lingo. Well, the newspaper has changed a lot too. It's undergone a lot of change. I think it looks good. I think there's a variety of writers. You guys are covering things differently, which is the way it goes, and that's important. It's important to have different perspectives. I was there a long time. In retrospect, it was a long time for community news. I think I have two opinions of it, but I felt that I was ready to move on, and I'm glad I did. Being on the other side is tough. I don't have to be in front of the camera or in front of a journalist all that often for my job, which is fine, and I kind of stay out of the limelight, if you will, and I'm fine with that. That's exactly why I liked to be the reporter person. So I think I've sort of, for the most part, maintained that. Once in a while, end up behind, in front of Shirley's camera, things like that. I think it's really important. I think I bring a lot of the understanding of news and how it's put together. I'm able to bring that into my current work and my relationships at work, and explain a little bit sometimes to colleagues who are going to be doing an interview how to prepare, or at least what to think about at the perspective of the person that is interviewing them. And so I think that's been really beneficial. And having been in community news, which you can do a lot of hard stories. We didn't do tons of hard news. We did a lot of community news. It would be different, I think, had I been working for say a really hard news outlet versus the community news. I'm glad for my experience. I'm okay with not having done too much. I had my share of a few exciting and a lot of important stories, but not necessarily not a lot of life, death. But some. It was such a rich experience. It touched everything, and I think I grew a lot just by being able to meet all of the people that I was able to meet, and really honored to have the responsibility to be able to share the stories that I was able to help share. It's just so powerful. Yeah. I think 250 years is definitely worth celebrating. I'm really happy to see the paper is alive and well, thriving. It's out in cyberspace. It's on Facebook. I'm eager to see how the next technologies disturb and challenge and enable the paper to grow. I hope that the paper version stays. I'm a sucker for a good book and a good piece of paper, but I do find myself reading it online as well. So I never thought I would appreciate an email link to the newspaper. It took me a while to appreciate that, but I do. I appreciate being able to navigate through stories and to get a rich connection, to go further. And I wish the Chronicle long life and success in pivoting, in meeting the challenges that come in the next 250 years.